Hello, YouTube family. My name is Joshua L, and it's been a while since I've made a video, but at least a video that I really can get behind, I guess. I don't know. Um, so, I want to talk about pretty much my content, and uh, I've made a video before on my content, but I've had to make videos on my content because it's completely shifted and changed at various times in my channel's history. But um, part of the reason why is because I come to different understandings about things, and I guess I need to talk a little bit about my personality to best illustrate this point because um, I'm always trying to find the absolute truth of something, though I don't really actually believe in absolute truth. Though I'll make statements like there is no such thing as an absolute truth, or I'll make statements as no human can know absolute truth, and people will say, well, isn't that a statement of absoluteness? And yes, it is, but it's also a matter of, it's a statement of accuracy unless a statement of propositional logic, because um, it's not that I make statements from the standpoint of their logical validity solely, but I make statements from the standpoint of their empirical accuracy, their agreement with experience, and their logical validity. And because I have three different criteria for which I use to, I suppose, assess the truth or the assessing accuracy. I can't really assess truth. Truth is elusive to me because there's always an underlying uncertainty to everything. When I first started dealing with MBTI, I learned quite a bit from Michael Pierce and reading David Kiersey and reading Von Fritz and reading um, Dr. Beebe and um, celebrity types and many other sources. But in my learning, a fatal flaw began to emerge, and that's the question of what makes for personality in the brain. Because as I was learning these things, I was also just actively studying cognitive science and neuroscience, and um, this lack of connection between the cognitive functions and personality and the actual uh, material science that existed on the brain and the mind bothered me, because I have the take on accuracy that I have. I want something to be logically valid. I want it to agree with what we empirically know, and I want it to agree with experience. I want all three to agree. If I can't find an agreement between all three, it's just I can't accept it. And so I went to try and see if this had been done. And the first person I went to was Dario Nardi, because, of course, that's who's doing the work, supposedly. But Dario Nardi, in the way that he went about doing his studies, it wasn't random nor blind. And since his studies were um, based upon self report questionnaires, and the actual methodology of assessment wasn't random or blind, you don't know how much of his results come down to chance and that how much of it proves the validity of the constructs of the cognitive functions themselves. Now, this was in his early work, in his early research. I don't think he's at UCLA anymore. So I don't really know how things have progressed since that point. But because there was this logical flaw in his research, or a methodological flaw, it doesn't mean that what he says isn't true. It doesn't mean that what he says isn't right. I don't know. It's hard to actually validate it or assess it because it doesn't actually, methodologically assessing it is much more difficult because he didn't use a random or blind study. And so statistically, the cards are not in his favor, but at the same time, that doesn't mean he's completely wrong. So I don't know. Either way, so I noticed that, and so I thought, oh, here's something for me to do. And the reason why I thought I could do this with topology is because of Michael Pierce's work and how Michael Pierce connected topology to philosophy. I reasoned that because Jung was actually more of an ontologist, he practiced ontology in his clinical practice. Ontology is a study of a species within an ecosystem or an environment, and the reason why ontology differs from other types of scientific work is because most of scientific work, in terms of its empirical validity, is validated by experimentation and within a controlled setting, under certain methodological provenance or provention provenance. So provided that these things are done and these things are met, all scientific fact is provisionally and tentatively true. And so that's how most science is done. But Jane Goodall, for instance, was an ontologist, and her work was with chimpanzees and bonobos mostly, and so it's in fact empirical and gives insight that couldn't be had whenever one is thinking about how chimpanzees and bonobos behave in lab settings or more controlled research settings, because you lose a lot of the complexity of the actual relationship between the creatures and their behavior and their environment when you don't have a bunch of chimpanzees around one another and you don't have them in the middle of a jungle. You're looking at a different thing, and there's a different degree of conclusion and facts that you can assess and make, and inference is always going to be a part of the picture, but what is most ideal, who knows. Either way, there are just two different ways of going about things. And I saw Jung's work, even if Jung was not exactly interested in material science from the physiological standpoint, he was at least an ontologist. And so he dealt with people in clinical settings. And so it's kind of like an ontology. To really do ontology with people, I guess you would have to watch people in an environment. But Jung, he went traversing around the world and spent time with various Aborigines tribes and doing all sorts of things, collecting his data and investigating the matters that he cared about. So I just trusted that his work was more empirically valid than was obvious. And that's the way that I would put it. Now, that is true to a certain extent with Jung's work, but that's almost mostly exclusively true with Jungian psychology from the broader sense. Now, when it comes to typology, it runs into statistical problems because when you try and come up with constructs, valid, predictable, reliable constructs with things like the cognitive functions or the personality archetypes themselves, you run into problems because the only way you can measure things with people is either through self-report or batteries. And when you measure the validity of self-reports and batteries, they have maybe a validity of 0.2. Now, that led people to step away from personality theory entirely. It's not just Jungian personality theory, but personality theory entirely. But when statistical methods became more advanced within psychology, and psychology existed as an empirical science for more years, the understanding became that to have a statistical reliability of 0.2 is actually standard and should be it should be used as a basis or a cutoff point. And if this sounds too like technical, just suffice to say that whenever you're talking about personality theory, there's a lot of uncertainty involved. That's the way that I can put it. Uncertainty in terms of what you're really looking at and what's behind what you're really looking at. Which we've tried to clear that up by using the Big Five and pairing the Big Five with cognitive science and neuroscience. But as is showing from personality as it's studied from the vantage point of cognitive neuroscience and animal behavior, that's probably in all likelihood going to change over time as well, because the Big Five is lexically oriented, and it's not based off of any physiological correlates. What the Big Five researchers assumed was that there were physiological correlates because there was predictive reliability in the constructs of the Big Five traits and dimensions themselves. And so it is what it is. Personality is not a perfect construct. There is no such thing as perfect scientific constructs in the first place. And so why did I want to make topology a scientific construct anyways? Because topology is very simple and it's easy to use, and so lots of people like it and appreciate it because it is very simple and easy to use. It's simple, so it's easier to understand than, say, metaphysics, but it's because it's simple and it's more curated for interpersonal relationships and how things work in social spaces. Primarily MBTI is like this. It's so very popular, and so if one could make it a valid scientific construct, you kind of have a megalithic personality theory that probably couldn't be supplanted for like many years. And so, to be honest, in like my own I guess like scientific ambitions, I set out for this mission because NE was like, what if? So I followed. But NE also has a tendency to pull me forward further and further into what if, and what is it that I don't know, and what is it that I don't understand, and where is it that I've not been, and what is it that I've not done. And so, of course, as you do more and more of this, for instance, reading Iain McGilchrist and reading more Jung, you start to notice a fatal flaw. Jungian topology cannot be instrumentalized to fit current scientific paradigms, because Jung believed that there was no distinction between spirit and matter. And so the reason why, and that's very relevant because science is practiced under the vantage of a materialistic frame. And the reason why that's necessary is because the only thing that scientific ideas are using to validate their let's just call it propositional validity, even though it's more appropriate to think of scientific propositions are hypotheses. And it's propositional. The only thing that validates science in its propositional validity is its predictive reliability. And think about what it's like to actually predict something in the world. It's very difficult to predict most things from a very broad standpoint, because most of what's going to happen at any point in time in your day-to-day experience is nothing that you're going to actually predict or be able to predict. There's a limited number of items that you can predict within your day because you're normalized to them, or they tend to go this way. And there is like general trends to how history progresses and how things go over time, but trends change. For instance, like if you look at the history of this planet, climate fluctuates, and so nothing is quite set in stone. Let's just put it like that. Though patterns are consistent and they may persist for a certain time or period, nothing's set in stone. So that's why scientific truth or propositions are posited provisionally, provided these definitions and constructs adhere to a material framework, in the sense that they are materialistically validly derived. That is, they have some predictive correlate or corollary, and they're tentative, meaning they will be accepted so long as the evidence is in favor of their adoption or our seeing the world in this way. And so this is how science works, and because Jung is like no to materialism, there's no to Jungian topology being a material science. And because I saw this flaw, and I'll be honest, as I was making videos, it became more and more apparent to me that it was becoming even like more difficult to so I guess because I sought to make it something it's not, I started to realize that my typology videos were becoming less and less and less and less and less MBTI and something totally else, something I invented. And I was okay with my inventing it until I realized that this is not the truth because of my starting grounds. Like, if I really want to make a personality theory that's in alignment with contemporary cognitive science and neuroscience, then I need to do that on my own. I cannot rely on Jungian personality theory. And because I actually want to professionally be a mathematician and a philosopher and a musician and a literary writer, I thought, dude, I already have a lot on my plate. I can't really do this. And no matter how entertaining or insightful or how much justice people feel that I do to the topic, from an honest standpoint or from the absolute truth of what I'm doing, I can't be telling the truth. Like, I can't. It's not possible. Not given what's actually happening. Not given what I actually know. It just can't be. And I know, like, people probably say, well, who cares? Like, but when you're dealing with my personality, that matters a lot. And so I blew up my own model and I like destroyed it. And I stopped doing it. I just stopped doing it. But because of all of the energy that went into that particular project and like the sour taste I got in my mouth from trying to undertake this creative endeavor, I decided like I wasn't going to do it any longer. And so I haven't returned to talking about topology, but I don't know. I just wanted to explain that because people will probably be able to guess why if they see a video that's probably going to be published recently. And yeah, that's the truth. And it is what it is. So that's my video, and thank you for watching. I mean, I don't know really where my channel is going to go, if I'm going to make more videos or I'm going to do anything, because I do find I want to talk about philosophy more. I want to talk about literature more. I want to talk about mathematics more. I want to talk about music more. I want to talk about these things that I'm actively studying, practicing, researching, and doing. But I don't feel qualified in doing so in all ways because I'm still finishing my degree. And I also don't know if there's interest in my viewership. And also the YouTube has changed. So when I came onto YouTube, there were people like DJ NRD and John Barnes and Enid Patterson and Leon of Type Tips. And so this is kind of the and there was Michael Pierce and Eric from Talking with Famous People, and this is kind of the generation of analysts and YouTube vloggers and typers that I was a part of. And later on, because I think my earliest video on MBTI is like 4 years old or 5 years old. Later on, like as time went on, you got things like INTJ and INFP Coffee and many others, and kind of what they did to topology was make it more in line with like contemporary entertainment and aesthetic values. And that's just not something I want to do, because I don't really care, if I'm going to be honest, because I think that what people are going to value me for and what I'm going to be successful in doing are going to be things that are more relevant to maybe the history of things than like contemporary matters. So if I have any contemporary relevancy, it's going to be because I did something historically relevant in some area of historical research or endeavor or something like that. But I don't really have the personality that's going to be. And if I'm entrepreneurial about things I actually like know, because for instance, like I said in another video, I do math, in-home math tutoring and things like that, but or physics tutoring, but I'm not I don't know, I'm not looking to like make an online platform that has not something to do with mathematics, philosophy, music, or literature. And so it is what it is. So I just wanted to make that video so that I guess I excised some intellectual demons and some shame. And so and to tell the truth to people as to like why I changed in making the content I was making, and why I don't really know what to do now, because the pursuit of truth has its consequences, the way that I'm going to put it, and I can't really look at anything that I come up with or do and it stand up to like the scrutiny or the criticism that I can pepper it with or assail it with. And so it is what it is. I don't know. I'm just hyper exploratory thinking thing, and I have recently just taken the stance that thinking is the prize and not so much the conclusion, as I don't ever feel like I'll be very certain of anything that I think. And it's very hard for me to know or be certain of anything. And indecision is creeping ever so like more into my mental space, and this seems to be just a continually ongoing trend, and it doesn't seem to be anything that I can really do anything about. It's more like the course of the seasons in my mind, and as the autumn rolls on and the leaves fall and winter comes on, so too does the nature of the content that I make, if I do make content. I don't know if I'm going to return, I guess, past my internal winter or past the winter. But if there is a spring, I assure you that whatever will dawn will just simply be whatever it is I think, and hopefully that still works for the majority of my viewership, because I don't know if I'll ever be popular. So that's my video, and thank you for watching.